Next up, we have Fury, written and directed by David Ayer, released October 17th, 2014. This film stars Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, Logan Lerman, Michael Pena, and Jon Bernthal. This film grossed $211 million worldwide on a budget of $68 million. In the depths of war, Sergeant Don War Daddy Collier leads 5 men into a deadly mission behind enemy lines. As they move to strike the heart of Nazi Germany, the team is outgunned, outnumbered, and afflicted with inexperienced soldiers.
Fury is dark, wet, and cold, and that's what David Ayer wanted. It seems like the sun doesn't shine in this entire film when you watch it. It seems to be always either nighttime or overcast. And obviously this film has a lot of similarities to Saving Private Ryan, but at this point, what more movie made in the 21st century doesn't? And it takes place over a period of just 24 hours, and it's an incredible cast led by Brad Pitt, who came back to kill Nazis with a different American accent. Although Fury couldn't be more different than Inglourious Bastards. And it follows this tank crew, which seems to be a great idea and setting for telling a story of camaraderie and brotherhood in war, because it's like this micro environment, this micro world where they're living inside this giant vehicle that's a massive weapon of war, but also a refuge and form of safety at the same time.
It's a great story about family and being accepted into a family, and Logan Lerman's character Norman essentially starts out as an outsider, and then he eventually is welcomed and accepted by these men as part of their brotherhood. And this film takes place in a very specific time of war in World War II, where the Nazis were on their heels and the Allied forces had taken control of most of Europe, and now they were attacking Nazi Germany itself. And so obviously the Germans were losing the war. And this actually takes place in the final weeks of World War II, where essentially the war was going to be over. Pretty much everyone knew it by then, but there was still a lot of fighting to do, and they still had to take control of Germany itself. So there's still some more work to be done.
Yeah, and Brad Pitt plays War Daddy, who's the commander of this tank crew, and like you just said, it takes place near the end, and he says in the film that he started this war killing Nazis in Africa, and now he's killing Nazis in Germany. So it's near the end, but still, the end is probably the most violent, because that's when the German and Nazi soldiers were most vulnerable. So, and again, we're talking about tanker crews and tank warfare, which the Nazis, one of their greatest weapons, and probably the greatest weapon of the time, were their tanks and their Panzer tanks and the Tiger tanks. These were advanced weaponry, and they could pretty much take on 2 or 3 Schofield American tanks at once, and virtually most British tanks, their shells would just bounce right off the Panzer and Tiger tanks, because their armor was so much more advanced, and so it was not an easy task to take on these tanks.
Yeah, and I think this is like you said, it's a great idea for telling a war story, and I think this cast works so well together. They all have a specific duty on the tank, and even though they couldn't be more different from one another, when they're fighting, they work as a perfect unit, and they understand each other so well. And I think Ayer chose a great cast. In the opening scene, they lose one of their members, which is obviously very devastating to the team, because they lost their brother. They're very cold to Logan Lerman's character Norman when he is assigned the tanker duty, and Norman is very similar to Upham in Saving Private Ryan, where he has no combat experience, and he's thrust into this tanker squad, having no idea how to even fire the gun he's assigned to. So he's another person who was just a teenage kid a few months before, and now he's part of a tanker unit in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, just like Upham, he represents basically the corruption of innocence and humanity in war. He probably comes across as a coward at first, not as bad as Upham, but he doesn't do his job during the first battle he's in. He doesn't fire his gun when he could, and it ends up resulting in the explosion and death of another tank crew and commander. And so War Daddy basically chews him out in this intense scene where he forces Norman to kill somebody. He forces Norman to kill a prisoner by holding him down, holding a gun in Norman's hand, and using Norman's hand and finger to pull the trigger to kill a Nazi prisoner. And this is basically his initiation for Norman into the tank crew, into the war.
Yeah, and War Daddy does this because Norman doesn't understand that this is no time for morality, and this is no time for honor and for turning the other cheek. These enemies, they have to be killed because, like, for example, in Saving Private Ryan, every soldier you spare can be a gun that goes up against you again. And War Daddy's trying to teach this to Norman, that we're here to kill, and you have to get used to it. You're not gonna be able to steer your way around killing people. This is your duty now. Norman learned first that failing to act cost the deaths of the other American soldiers, and then he learns from this from being forced to execute this man that killing is a necessary part of warfare, and there's no avoiding it.
And he does his job next time around, the next fight, the next battle, and he does pull the trigger, and he does kill and helps them win, and he eventually, towards the end of the film, becomes completely corrupted by war. But he is turned into a killer, and he is starting to be accepted into the crew. And Shia LaBeouf is awesome in this movie, and his commitment to roles is intense. And for this film, according to him, this is what he did. After the day he got the job, he joined the U.S. National Guard. He was baptized, accepted Christ into his heart, tattooed his surrender, and became a chaplain's assistant to Captain Yates for the 41st Infantry. He spent a month living on a forward operating base. Then he linked up with the cast and went to Fort Irwin. He pulled out his tooth, knifed up his face to make it seem real because it was real, and spent days watching horses die. And he also didn't bathe for 4 months during production.
He must have stank.
So he goes intense on his commitment to roles, and you take that how you want.
David Ayer also had the actors, the leading 5 actors, fight each other on set during breaks as a way to build their camaraderie, and he would literally have them fight and wrestle each other.
And just like in 1917, we do get a few moments of almost humanity in this movie, where they're in that small German town, and War Daddy takes Norman up to that apartment. And they find that apartment with the 2 women inside of it, and this shows, I think, a lot of character background of War Daddy, because it seems like he has a family, or maybe had a family. He has kids, maybe he has a wife back home, but he probably hasn't seen them in a long time because he's been at war for so long. He even hints that he's been around fighting since World War I. And he kind of tries to play house here. He sort of tries to act like a husband, sort of, or seem like he's a normal man for a little bit. But despite him being a ruthless killer, he still does show some display of morality, where he doesn't take advantage of these women. He doesn't try to force himself onto them. But we do get that very cute relationship between Norman and the young German girl in that apartment.
Yeah, and I think War Daddy is just looking for a moment of normalcy. Like, he shaves his face nice and clean, and he sits down at the table and is reading a paper. And I think he just wants to experience something normal for just a moment. And there is actually a deleted scene where we learn more about his character that David Ayer had to delete for time constraints. And his backstory is that when he was younger, he got drunk, and while driving a car with his girlfriend and his brother in the car, he drunkenly crashed the car, and they were killed, and then he was burnt up. That's why his back has that intense burn scars all over his back. And after he was arrested, he was given the option: you can go to jail or you can die for your country in war. And so he decided to go to war, and he expected himself. He didn't expect himself to survive the war, especially this long. And if you look closely at the end of the film, after War Daddy's been killed, his Norman goes into the tank to cover him with a jacket out of respect, and then he grabs War Daddy's pistol, and on the pistol handle there is the image of a woman, and it's his girlfriend who died. He taped her photograph to the handle of his pistol.
This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is also brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your comfort, obsesses over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. And right now is a great time to get your holiday gifts from Manscaped.com for the men in your life, whether you got brothers, a husband, boyfriend. This is the best present you could ever get a guy. I swear to God. Use coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout right now. They have a 25% off sale running through Black Friday to Cyber Monday for 25% off your entire order and free shipping at checkout. Use Raiders of the Lost coupon code. And they just released their Performance Package 3.0. So again, 25% off your entire order and free shipping. Coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout. And the scene also gives us a complete juxtaposition of characters where the other men in their tanker crew come in, and you can tell that they're completely morally corrupt because they seem to they seem like they're about to take advantage of the woman and kind of just overpower War Daddy and Norman. Even though War Daddy is their commanding officer, it seems like they're about to just take the woman for themselves no matter what War Daddy says. And if it isn't for the attack that they hear forcing them to have to leave, it seems like they would have succeeded too.
Yeah, I think that War Daddy understood that, yes, these men are his brothers, but they have seemed to have lost all of their humanity and their decency. And so I think that's why he didn't invite them up to the house. And he knew that Norman still had a great amount of humanity and morality within him. And that's why he fit into the playing of normalcy along with War Daddy. And obviously the other men are extremely jealous for not being invited up. And they even show that he was right there. They seem to be very dangerous.
And it's a horrible scene next where they leave the apartment building because they have to go fight, and then that building gets completely destroyed in front of them. And this is obviously that very emotional point for Norman. And also this is a point where Norman basically turns complete character transformation into a ruthless killer now, because in the next battle, he is screaming at the top of his lungs. He is pulling the trigger as hard as he can. He's trying to kill as many Nazis as he can for revenge on what happened to his day-long girlfriend.
Day-long girlfriend.
If that.
Yeah, he's essentially been desensitized by warfare, and he's been stripped of his humanity, and now he has become a hardened soldier. And it's amazing because wartime is such a horrible thing that it happened so quickly. It only took a matter of days to turn this innocent, naive young boy into a killer, a ruthless killer at that. And that's what happens in warfare is innocent men lose their innocence, and they lose their morality, and they become killing machines.
I think the greatest strength of this film is the cinematography by Ronan Vazianov, who's been doing all of Ayer's films since End of Watch. And I think it's a true skill, just like in Saving Private Ryan and in 1917 for a cinematographer to be able to take something as devastating as war, make it look beautiful at the same time. And I think this film does a great job. We get a lot of really cool, interesting shots and lighting, and it's actually very beautiful. But I think if there's a con to this film, it's probably a little bit of the storyline, and probably the characters seem a little thin. I mean, they're all good and they're all fun and they're all unique, but also they seem kind of just have one character trait about them. That's about it. And sort of cliched at times, but it's very well acted, though. I'll give them that.
Yeah, it's a great cast, and I think that something that this film showed that Ayer put into the film is he really showed the idea of the Hitler Youth, where at the end of the war, because he was so desperate, Hitler assigned new battalions of young boys, like little kids, like 10, 11, 12-year-old boys, and they became soldiers. And there are two instances where we see Hitler Youth in this film, and they were pretty common at this time in the war. And even though they were young kids, they posed a real serious threat to Allied forces, and they honestly most of the time they had to be killed out of the threat of their own lives.
We have a great climax that's similar to Saving Private Ryan, where it's basically they're up against insurmountable odds. It's 5 men versus 300. It's obviously a little far-fetched that they do as well as they do, but it's based loosely on a true story where there were a couple of tanks that survived against an onslaught of other German forces. But it's a great climax. It's a lot of fun, and everyone dies except for Norman. And we do get a glimpse at Nazi youth here, but maybe a character similar to Norman, where Norman's hiding under the tank at the end of the battle, at the end of the fight, and a Nazi young soldier peeks underneath the tank and sees Norman there. And instead of telling everyone that there's an Allied soldier under the tank, he doesn't say anything. He lets him go, because I'm sure they're both dealing with the same thing. I'm sure they're both in a war they didn't want to be in, both fighting for something that they didn't want to fight for.
Also, to piggyback off of that, the sniper who shot War Daddy and inflicted him with the fatal wound, that sniper is actually shows that we see his face, and he's actually an older man. Seems to be about Brad Pitt's age. So I think that both those characters are parallels to Norman and War Daddy. Also, a really cool fact about this is that Michael Peña's character, Gordo, he has a wooden cross in this film, and he actually used the same cross in the film The Martian, the one that he left on the base that, what's Matt Damon's character's name?
Mark Watney.
That Mark Watney shaves to create fires. It's the exact same cross as the cross in this film.
This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by our friends at movieposters.com. Use coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today, just in time for the holiday season. If you love movies as much as us and want to decorate your house, your apartment, your bedroom, it's the best website to use, especially with our coupon code Raiders15 at checkout for 15% off your order. They have great designs, framing, backlight canvas, even plaque designs. Again, Raiders15 at checkout for 15% off your order from movieposters.com.